Adventure Time is one of Cartoon Network's most remembered series because of how it manages to develop its characters throughout its 10 seasons, chapter by chapter, each one learning very important lessons that shape their personality. But in the end, something very different happens. But in fact, weapons play a crucial role in Finn's development both physically and emotionally. From the classic golden sword to the mysterious grass sword, each one left an indelible mark in the life of the last human of O. In this video, we will analyze the secrets and curses behind these weapons and how they led him to lose his right arm, not once but twice, how these swords affect Finn's development, and also how he ends up betraying the master who taught him how to use the. We are going to begin with the first sword of the end, is the classic golden sword, that despite appearing for a short period of time, it is very characteristic and I'm sure everyone remembers it. We don't know how he gets it, but we know that its name is Scarlet thanks to a Nintendo DS game about the series. The way it disappears is very interdimensional. The boys defrost a group of businessmen who come to work for them because they are addicted to work and that calms their anxiety. At this point, one of them sharpens and polishes Scarlet, this being the only opportunity in which we see it in perfect condition. The interdimensional comes in the chapter where the sword disappears forever, the Ryu. The Bubblegum Princess organizes a science event attended by several intelligent scientists, and since she admires Finn's heroic mentality, she asks him to prepare a talk on the topic he wants for that afternoon. The problem is that Finn wants to give a monologue intelligent enough to surprise the scientists, but he doesn't consider himself an intelligent person, so he decides, find the quickest way to acquire knowledge that doesn't imply to study, but to wear glasses containing all the knowledge of the universe makes brain damage to Finn, and becomes so crazy that he goes to the Fair Sciences with an interdimensional bubbler. This machine is capable of creating bubbles in 2, 3, and even 4 dimensions. But a bubble in 4 dimensions is something that escapes our understanding. It generates a black hole that begins to suck all the guests. Jake luckily contains them enough time for them to take off Finn glasses, and finally recovers his sanity, and with his sword he decides to make that black hole explode, surprisingly halfway there. The interdimensional bubbler flies through the air, and he manages to cross it with the Scarlet, giving rise to the creation of the 4-dimensional sword, a weapon with which he finally manages to explode the black hole, but which disappears forever at that very moment, when he doesn't have his sword anymore. He is forced to spend a few episodes unarmed, but on his birthday he finds his next sword in the last part of a mysterious train, the Root Sword. 2 roots coiled around each other holding a silver and slightly pink double-edged blade, the Root Sword. It lasts all the time series, and he doesn't lose it at any time. Sometimes he replaces it with others, or he simply doesn't use it. But he always carries it in his backpack ready for anything. But if there is a weapon that competes to be the best blade, is the Sword of Demonic Blood. The Demonic Blood is a hereditary mythical sword and legendary. Mythical because it was made using the blood of a demon. A mythological being hereditary because the boys inherited it from their father Joshua, and legendary because they not only had to go through a dungeon full of traps to get it, but also because they knew about the existence of that dungeon thanks to the holographic tapes that their dead father left them hidden in the house. The bad thing, it doesn't happen here, but rather when they return to their house and the sword it is already in their possession. While the boys were sleeping, the Ice King and this other fool accidentally summon Ki-Off, the demon with the sword.
Too bad neither of us can read demon runes.
Oh, I know how. Booty-rum laxuri poki-oth brandium. Like that. Oops.
He is obviously overheated because they stole his blood, so he takes them as hostages until the brothers enter the sequence. The only thing he wants is to recover the blood that was taken from him, or at least that is what he is told. In the end, Finn decides to believe him, and despite the pleasure it gives him to have the sword in his hands, he breaks it by the half. This allows the demon to recover not only his freedom, but also his powers and how he confused Jake with Joshua. He kidnaps him just before escaping. This way, Finn learned that doing things right does not guarantee that things will turn out well, as he confused him with Joshua. When he kidnaps him, he steals his blood to make a hat with it, just as his father did with him. And from now on the episode becomes very strange. On one hand, Jake remains stoic without paying even a glance to Coyote, to the point that he does not even bother to clarify that he is not Joshua. And on the other hand, there is the demon who feels trampled by his attitude, and to distract him, throws a woman into the pit who tries to flirt with him. Jake remains faithful to Raincorn and does not give the girl a chance. This makes her angry, and she begins to beat the hell out of him. But just arrive Raincorn accompanied by Finn, wielding the demon blood apparently repaired. What Kiet doesn't know is that in reality that is not the original, but a replica made from grape juice mixed with holy water, that as soon as he tries to suck it explodes. Jake is safe again and the other girl is finally free. Actually, Finn has no attachment to this material object. When he has his father's sword, he enjoys it, but he also knows that no matter how long he has been in his hands, that sword does not belong to him. But he is borrowing it from the universe, and sooner or later he has to return it. He knows that if he loses it, he doesn't have to be afraid. He can continue his life even if he is unarmed. He breaks it because he knows it is the right thing to do, and because he understands that it is not even better, nor worse than the next sword that comes to him. He is the only one who decides if the next one is a good weapon or a disaster. But in reality, the next is one of the most important swords of his life. A sword that brings with it a curse that ends up being the culprit that causes me to lose the same arm twice. The Sword of Grass. Finn and Jake took a walk through the fair to find a replacement for the demon blood. When they came across a grass store, they enter, and inside they are served by a mysterious magician who offers them the grass sword. At first everything seemed normal, but over time the boys realized that there is something strange with the chlorophyll weapon. So after a couple of nightmares and disturbing sequences, Finn tries to get rid of it. But this is impossible. Even Jake methodically tries to disable the instrument, but he doesn't achieve it. They no longer know what to do to get that thing off Finn's hands, so they go back to look for the grass magician with hope of finding an answer in his camp. They don't find it. But later our protagonists find this mage's lair. They cross this long garden together, murdering a wide variety of grass enemies until they reach the creator, who without problems clarifies their doubts, revealing that the sword is not normal, but rather it carries a curse. But even if he wanted to do it, he is unable to reverse the spell. They can kidnap him, torture, and whatever he wants, but in the end he will have to live with it on his arm for the rest of his life. Now that he accepted the course he can save and take out at will, Finn really becomes a master with the sword in Rattleball's chapter. Here meets the sensei who would teach him everything he knows. At this point he was working as bodyguard for Princess Bubblegum. But since the last few weeks had been really hard, she asks him to take a break, a vacation to relax a bit. The best way to get rid of stress for him is breaking things in an abandoned dumpster. Here meets Sir Rattleballs, a gumball machine, for obvious reasons. Despite his flirtatious and non-threatening appearance, Rattleballs proves to be a master in the art of swinging the sword. Unfortunately, he had been disabled for years due to an accident. One day he tripped, and when one of the pieces of gum fell inside him, bounced and got stuck in a very uncomfortable place in his throat. Finn uses the grass sword to get the gum out of him, and for this reason, to pay off his debt, Rattleballs teaches him all his tricks. They spend the entire afternoon practicing together, training side by side. He becomes a teacher and Finn his student. The only thing that doesn't achieve to teach him is Rattleball's ultimate move. At the end of the day, they trusted each other at least enough for the gumball machine to come loose, and I confess a very dark secret. He didn't know it, but to tell that secret would put his own life at risk. Rattleballs was the last survivor of a series of robots manufactured to take care of the Candy Kingdom, predecessors of the official guardians who currently protect it. Under the regime of Princess Bubblegum, the green light was given for the manufacture of this series of robots that would cover every corner of the city. But for her, they became too dangerous. The people were in danger, and to save them she carried out a genocide that ended with 100% of the robots eliminated. Or at least that's what she thought until that moment. Rattleballs was the last of his kind, something similar to what Finn the last human felt like. He is still alive only because he remained hidden. He is aware that the princess will kill him if she finds out where he is, although this apparently does not move Finn, whom without mercy gives his location to the princess, and they visit him the next day. But is it correct to claim that Finn is a traitor for telling the princess his location? Think that between betray Rattleballs, who met him that same afternoon, or betray Bonnie, who has known her for a long time. Finn was actually very loyal to his people. What really is the problem is that Rattleballs is not to blame for being a simple victim, while Finn is nothing more than part of the problem. A faithful knight of a kingdom that believes is sweet, but is actually led by one of the most bitter characters in the entire Princess Bubblegum. As a plot twist, Rattleball's murdering was actually false, because she forgave his life and in the end named him Sir Rattleballs, guardian of the sweet kingdom from the shadows. From then on, the bad thing is that shortly after he lost his life in the most ridiculous way possible. But before talking about Rattleball's death, let's talk about the first time that Finn loses his arm. Here he travels another reality in which he defeats Lick and meets his biological father Martin for the first time. But he runs away right when he finds out that he is his son. While escaping in a ship with other prisoners, Finn tries to stop them. The grass sword transforms into a large root, and he makes a very good attempt to withstand the tension, but his arm ends up giving up. This is a moment of shock for him. Luckily it doesn't last long because he recovers it in a few chapters of a strange ritual. He grows a new arm. He has an apparently useless thorn in his palm. But having lost the grass sword is not a problem because he gets a much better one. The Finn sword that contains a miniature version of himself inside the handle. And how he got that sword? Well, in one occasion, the Lick murdered Prismo. Jake's best friend Prismo made very good pickles, and with the dog they agreed that if one day he lost his life, Jake would put into practice a plan to revive him. When he ate the last pickle, he would have to do a ritual and go to sleep instantly. This happens and Jake teleports to Prismo's time chamber, while Finn stays in the treehouse reliving memories of him that explode as soon as he does something different from what they did in the past. Prismo guided Jake to a room in which he prepared a trap. There was the bed of your dreams. The feathers on the blanket were from babies of an endangered bird. And he had even left him a glass of milk. But why does he do this? Because Prismo exists in the dream of an old man who sleeps for the eternity. When he woke up he disappeared. And now that Jake sleeps eternally, he can exist in his dreams. And this point is where the second part of the plan begins. When he revives Jake's last memory, he does exactly the same thing. There Prismo was waiting for him. First he says to wake Jake up and bring him home, but then he tells him to go and prevent his past version from waking up Jake. This would leave a version of the dog sleeping so that Prismo could still be alive and another one who is with them safe and sound. But there was no way to ensure which of the two Finn was going to explode when he found himself and generated that paradox. It was already proven that there is little fear of paradoxes. So he does so, and at that moment the Finn sword is born. This sword is not just any weapon. It contains a miniature replica of Finn within the blue gem. Although it is incorrect to say that it is a replica of Finn, in reality it is both. The inside and outside of the sword are Finn. He exists in both places at the same time. They have the same consciousness, and this can be seen in their behavior. The one who is locked up should be depressed for being a prisoner, but acts as if was out because in fact he is, until someone decides to break the gene. Then the miniature version separates from the original and becomes a new conscious being. Unfortunately, it is also taken prisoner, and to make matters worse, all this happens because of Finn. It all begins with our protagonists on a bridge. Finn thought it was a good idea to do tricks with the sword while walking around. It was very irresponsible because he is even aware that the sword is not having a good time, and he continues doing it, but well. However, after this nonsense they can't find it. They are late, and they are forced to abandon it. That night, the boy suffers nightmares and visions. A bandit found his sword and is now, because in a bad move the grass crosses the gem that protected him. This event was the cause of something much stranger taking place in Finn's life. The cause of him losing his arm for the second time, and the reason why his new friend would come to life. All of this happens thanks to the fact that Susan goes crazy and tries to kidnap Finn. The situation makes Rattleballs come out of the shadows determined to save the day. But unfortunately he ends up dying in the most ridiculous way possible. Susan goes to the sea, and as soon as the boy's life is put in danger, just like in his fight with the bandit, the grass sword comes out to defend him. Only this time Finn loses total control over the grass. He takes Susan into the air and squeezes her until she stops breathing. He hits his hand, which makes her let go. But when the grass wraps itself, returning to his arm, the grass finds the sword, this time forever, on the outside. It looks like Finn lost his arm, but inside the sword something much more macabre was happening. The curse of grass materialized in this green grass reaches the blue gem and slowly takes over the place. The miniature Finn, who still doesn't understand much, is as if he just woke up. Little by little he sees himself trapped in this substance, until he is completely covered, and right there a being is born in grass form. With the passage of time it takes a shape very identical to the original. But chapter by chapter he realizes that he is not really Finn. He learns to accept that, and at the end of the series, in fact, a small spoiler, Fern dies, leaving a seed for Finn. He cultivates it, and many years later, a gigantic tree ends up growing with Finn's sword stuck at the top. Sword that Finn never gets to use it. Neither the Finn nor the grass sword. The next weapon he uses is the Rattleball's sword. Jake gave Fern a hand with her problems while Finn tries to cure Susan in the hospital. Since she had been left unconscious from their last confrontation, he thought that the best way to wake her up would be to awaken her survival instincts by throwing the Rattleball's sword over her head. Although Dr. Merton's test could not be completed successfully at the end of the episode, his correct reasoning is proven. The weapon is a Peyton-type sword designed by George Peyton in 1910 when he was just a lieutenant. It has a rigid, easy-to-grip handle and is loaded with a single-channel blade, perfect for use as a thrust weapon. It was perfect for Rattleballs while he was alive, and now she is perfect for Finn, and it is the weapon which the Lick uses to kill the Lick. How is this possible? Well, because Sweet Pea, the cool version of the Lick, that was left after Finn regenerated all his flesh, begins to have evil visions because the Lick hand, literally a severed hand of a Lick from another dimension, comes to Sweet Pea's reality. Here is a whole chapter where Finn chases a Lick trying to protect Sweet Pea, and it ends up being Sweet Pea himself who finally kills that Lick hand. Finally arriving at the Night Sword hand forged by Mint and enchanted by Hanson Abadier. The King of the Nightosphere is objectively the best sword that the human gets. At first, they make it so that he can have a good sword to defeat Bonnie's evil relatives, but then he doesn't use it for anything at all. This chapter is mainly an excuse for Marceline's father to spend a day with her and go deeper in the relationship of Marceline and her father. The last time we see the Night Sword is on the back of a very adult Sweet Pea walking through the Kingdom of, or around the same time that Shermie grabs the final sword in the treetop fern. Important milestone in Finn's life is undoubtedly the reunion with his father, but it is undeniable that each of the swords that he explores in the series are a very important part of his path. He ends up learning many lessons thanks to those weapons, but it is true that the most important is the Finn sword. Not because he has a miniature version of him inside, nor because he gave life to Fern, but more specifically because of the moment in which Finn he loses by doing tricks. When he breaks his father's sword, he was forced to do it, so there would be no point in feeling guilty. But this last weapon was lost because of him. No one forced him to do what he did not make a mistake, and he acted responsibly, which is why he ends up destroyed. He believes that he is completely kind and that he would never act evil when in reality we are all the angel and the devil at the same time. Sometimes reason drives us and other times passion. Acting in a good way does not exempt us of being able to be evil on other occasions. As children, it is made clear to us that things are white or black, but by saying this we ignore that in reality everything has its white side and everything has its black side, including us. Every time we find a side of our personality that we dislike, our ego, it finds enough excuses to deny that it exists without us feeling guilty or stupid. But by repressing that part of us, the only thing we do is throw it into our subconscious, which the more it represses, the more it feeds an unconscious entity called the shadow. This shadow is made up of, for all the negative characteristics of our personality. and it is the side of our being that most choose to deny. And although we can hide it with a mask, eventually it always attacks again. That is why it is so important to accept that in addition to being good, we are also bad, and we can act in a bad way on many occasions. In this way, we will be able to recognize our shadow, know what are the mistakes that we made in the past, and that we are most likely capable of making again. Keep all that in mind and feel the guilt and pain necessary at the time to make mistakes without looking for excuses to feel good, since all that suffering for having acted badly will be the memory that in the future will prevent us from making the same mistake again.